Thank you for viewing this YouTube archive of a Conscious Consumer Network broadcast. Please feel free to share it far and wide. Check out our weekly broadcast guide for weekly updates on scheduled broadcasts. Help keep us on the air by contributing to our network support fund. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter or get in touch via email. We thank you for supporting free and independent media. Each life we incarnate into has a divine purpose. For the majority of people on this planet, their purpose has eluded them. We have become so distracted with the struggle to survive that we have forgotten what we are here to do. In alignment with the sacred laws of nature, the ultimate purpose of all existence is to create and evolve. We certainly do not incarnate into life with the intention to destroy. And yet, we have come to live in a very destructive world. As a result, there are many out there who feel lost or adrift, whilst knowing deep down inside that something is very wrong with their reality. Many people wish they could do something of value, anything that is purposeful, instead of having to submit to a system of slavery in order to survive. It is important never to let go of that feeling. That is your soul crying out to you, telling you that your life has value and that you do indeed have a purpose. The most important thing you can do in life is to recognize your purpose, and often that requires a lot of soul searching. Life indeed dishes out some pretty tough challenges, which will either move you closer towards your purpose path, or will give you great training for when you finally realize what it is that you came here to do. But more often than not, the very clues about your life's purpose are hidden in plain sight, woven into the very fabric of our existence. But we are so easily distracted by irrelevant details that don't really matter, that often we miss the very obvious right in front of us. It is because of our willful ignorance of anything that does not fit our preconceived ideas that the truth about the nature of our reality is so readily hidden in plain sight. This is a very deep and personal journey, which has come to be expressed in many aspects throughout my life. This is not just an attempt to retell a bunch of research and pass it off as my own, for I am very grateful and openly acknowledge all the many wonderful people that I have been given the opportunity to work with and to learn from in order to get to the point where I've come to know what I now know. This is a journey I was always destined to go on, and likewise, how I have come to know this information forms as much a part of the story as the information itself.
Live.
Hello everybody, wherever you may be on this gorgeous planet. This is Conscious Consumer Network Live, and my name is Mel Ve, and this is Season 2 of Dragonology. Indeed, tonight is the season finale, and that makes it episode 13 of Season 2. So, if you have tuned in, thank you very much for doing so. Settle in, get something to drink, because this is going to be an interesting episode. We're going to be doing some rounding up and some catching up and some tying together as we do here on Dragonology. First off, just to bring in a little bit of an introduction so we can set the tone for tonight's presentation, a discussion on what is Dragonology. Well, basically, the deciphering of artificial draconian construct. That is what Dragonology is. It's the deciphering of the artificial draconian construct, which is projected upon humanity in order to keep us enslaved through an exploration of etymology, words, language, literature, symbolism, art, architecture, artifacts, history, mythology, fairy tale, anthropology, and, of course, culture. And then, what is the purpose of Dragonology? The very purpose of Dragonology is to identify the common origins of our present-day cultures, societies, religion, and war, which can all be traced back to the dragon and the worship thereof, taking the form of rituals often involving sacrifice. So, if you've been watching the past few Dragonologies, the last 2 seasons of Dragonology, this, of course, will be pretty much drummed into you by now, that what we have done is identify the common origins of cultures across the world, everywhere where you start to see buildings, settlement, art, working of metal, weapons, society, literature, okay, printing, anything to create symbols so that people can recognize. This all gets traced back to the dragon. And all these things are actually rituals. And many of these rituals do involve sacrifice. Many of these rituals have allegories alluding to sacrifice. So you have to understand that this is a very simplified, condensed explanation of the purpose of Dragonology, but it is probably the most succinct we can get. And tonight we're going to be jumping quite quickly through the entire syllabus we've been through over the last 2 seasons, but tying together all the important points so that you can see the bigger picture, having gone all the way in to look at the detail. Now, one of the most important things to do, of course, and I've left the concept of themes right to the very end, because the hope is that people will start to identify the themes for themselves, you know, the need to grasp the themes and the repetition of these themes. For me to turn around and say, oh, look at the themes, it seems like I'm programming or preempting people into a certain way. So having left the actual discussion of, you know, why it's important to grasp the themes till the very last episode, there's a reason for it. Okay, first off, it is crucial to grasp the repetition of certain themes and patterns in order to see the full extent of the draconian construct. But also, if you point out certain themes specifically and leave others alone, it can be said that you're slanting a picture. So always what I like to do is present all the evidence that I've come across, and hopefully people can pick up on the repetition of themes for themselves. Now, as we go through the course of tonight's Dragonology, it'll obviously become more clear to you what I mean by some of these repeating themes, because you'll start to pick up on, how we've gone down the track of this and that through the course of the last 2 seasons. To start off with, let's get into a few of the symbolic factors which tie into the exploration of the dragon cult and its mythology. And that is the dragon elementals. this is one I've been meaning to deal with for some time, but have left it perhaps by accident, perhaps on purpose, right to the end. And it really does tie in beautifully. All dragons are inextricably linked with the 4 elements of creation, which are basically water, air, fire, and earth. Now, there's various themes that tie into dragons which link them to one or all of these various elements. For example, dragons are inextricably linked and associated with water and are commonly able to manipulate and transverse or travel through water. They're also commonly associated with sacred rivers, wells and springs and waterfalls and all that sort of stuff. So there's that allegory, water monsters, or even think of the biblical Leviathan, who threatened God's creation by causing upheaval from the waters of the abyss. You know, there is all this allegory of water that comes with the dragons as well. Now, water deities is something we've covered off quite extensively in dealing with dragonology and the various deities that turn up under, or the various deities that represent dragons, I should say. Of course, mermaids, oceanids, sirens, and this actually is a really lovely deity that turns up in African mythology. Notice the moon there. Always you've got the moon symbol when it comes to these mother goddess symbols, but with a fish tail as well, like mermaids, like many of the deities that we've come to know over the course of dragonology. Of course, many of them are known as sirens, harpies. There's various descriptions for these water deities. And of course, there's also what commonly gets referenced as sea gods. Poseidon and Neptune, obviously one became the other when Roman pantheism invaded Greek and kind of sort of took over their gods. But Phorcys as well. We've spoken quite a lot about Phorcys and how the Harpies were the daughter of Phorcys. And you've got the lovely orc dragon word in there as well. So, yes, you get a lot of these sea god allegories, mermaids, and it all kind of ties in. And notice over here, Neptune holding a sphere, which turns up quite a lot as well. We've covered that off in previous dragonologies too. But notice the flying cherubs as well, and seahorses. Hippocampses are usually called. Now, what's interesting to notice is that the Sumerian deities are also depicted in some carvings as having a fish body, but also as having wings, commonly with scales. Look, you've got scales here on lots of the body, scales represented there with winged human deities, and we'll get onto that in a little bit. But what's interesting is that they were often depicted winged, or with what looks like a fish lower half or mermaid lower half, as we've come to know in common cultures, mermaids, but, you know, sort of a fish lower half, or having wings, or sometimes they get depicted with both, you know, a long tail like a mermaid with wings as well. We'll go on to some of those depictions in a minute. The other element, of course, that we spoke about of the 4 elements of creation that is inextricably associated with dragons is, of course, air. And dragons are often depicted as being winged, and thus they are able to manipulate and transverse or travel through air. Now, that's not something that typically human beings can do unless, you know, you're attached to a paraglider or something. But what's interesting to notice, of course, is the etymological similarity between wing and wind, right? Wind, obviously, moving air, and wings, obviously, what is used to move through air. And of course, the winged serpents turn up just about everywhere. Here's some Egyptian depictions of it. Here we got a gold depiction from King Tut's tomb. So you can see a cobra-type body with a human head, and it's winged, okay? Here as well, same story, winged serpent. Now, the serpents we see today generally aren't winged, so we know that this is a depiction of a dragon. And of course, in other cultural mythologies, for example, Roman mythology and Greek mythology, you often had these serpents turning up winged as well. And this one is actually putting Saturn through the sky. So this is a flying winged serpent pulling another deity through the sky. This is actually a Gorgon, most likely Medusa, but you can see winged deity, much like angels, which are also winged deities. Dragons are winged deities, and you can see this one's got a tail with it as well. And this is an old artwork, classical artwork, with, guess what, wings. And of course, then fairies as well, also winged little beings or big beings or whatever, but they've got wings on them and they can fly, manipulate air. So all tying into the elemental of air. And then, of course, you've got the jinn. We've spoken plenty about the jinn in previous dragonologies, but also commonly depicted, look over here, with wings. It seems very much to be in the air with wings, able to manipulate the air, right? And, of course, fire. Fire is inextricably linked with dragons. I'm sure that goes without saying if anybody's watched Lord of the Rings. But dragons are always linked with fire and often said to be able to breathe fire. Very interesting, that. Now, the concept of the jinn, as we've already spoken about, or genie, are often referenced as being wreathed in flames, sometimes described as smokeless fire. In other words, they don't burn, but they are wreathed in flames. And this is a common theme with the Arabic classification of the dragon being the jinn or the genie. And sometimes you'll notice the holy figures such as Muhammad will be wreathed in a fire halo. Okay, that's very interesting because the halo is depicted as being fire. But again, a smokeless fire. So it's a shimmering glow, but there's no smoke coming from it because nothing is combusting. There's no burning going on. Okay, but that is how the halo of, obviously, light was depicted as flames. So in Islamic art, holy beings are depicted with a fire halo, as opposed to a round one like the angels in Christianic art. Now, the fourth element we're obviously going to be dealing with is the last, being the earth element, which dragons are linked with the theme of earth through a series of allegorical symbols, such as being credited with the creation of earth, and we get onto the creation in a minute, and also through the earth mother or mother goddess archetypes. Okay? Now, earth dragon, this is a photo I've used many times in dragonologies before, and it is just one that was quite momentous for me. So when I started to realize that there was some truth to this whole dragon stuff, and decided to go visit a few churches, here in Holland, and stumbled into this particular church in Leiden, which is a really beautiful church, Roman Catholic church, with a big, nice all-seeing eye on the plinth on the outside. But when you go in one of the little niches, you find this very clear depiction of a dragon. You can see it's a serpent-like being because its tail's wrapped around there. Okay, you can see it's got little claws. Okay, so it's a serpent with arms and legs, wrapped around a tree, standing under what looks like a mother goddess. It's holding a lily, right? And it's got a halo around her head. That's very interesting. So the dragon is under the mother goddess and looks to be under the earth as well, because it seems to be where the earth is, and the dragon appears to be under it, so part of the earth. That's a very interesting depiction. But of course, dragons are much like this one here, where it's got its tail wrapped around the tree. Dragons are inextricably linked with trees through many other stories and mythologies and allegories. Of course, we've got Norse mythology, where you've got the world tree and the dragon that guards the underworld. Normally, you've got a serpent wrapping around it as well, like the Ouroboros. You can see over here. It's got a little dragon. You see the horns on the tail, grabbing the tail. Ouroboros wrapped around. And then, of course, it's a dragon in the underworld over here. But what's interesting to notice as well is the Garden of Eden. Obviously, you've got the serpent being there too, the talking serpent wrapped around the tree, or giving Eve the apple from the tree. So the story goes. And then, of course, when we're talking about apples, we're talking about fruit.
dragons and fruit are inextricably linked, and this is something we've spoken about many times in previous dragonologies, and we've gone over each and every one of these fruit and the etymology pertaining to them in previous dragonologies. And indeed, some of the most common fruit are in fact rooted in dragon etymology, such as pear, apple, grape, banana, orange, I've got pear again, I beg your pardon, and avocado. Now, there is one more element, and that is the fifth element. Now, both the common besides the common four elements, there is an additional element which is not commonly referenced, but it is acknowledged in many occult circles and many ancient priesthoods. There's always a hidden element or of everything. It's not just saying that there's a hidden element of society or hidden secret societies. There is a sort of hidden element known as the fifth element, not just a good movie with Mila Jovovich and Bruce Willis. It's actually a fifth element, which is sort of like Ophiuchus, which is the 13th zodiac, which is also kind of hidden. The fifth element's not really acknowledged, okay? And besides the four elements, there is a fifth element, which is spirit or ether, as it's known. Now, what's interesting about the word spirit, and we've done this in previous dragonologies, this is not new to any of you, it's rooted in serpentine etymology, okay? The word spiro or spiro means dragon, and that's where you get the word spiral, which is why often dragons are represented as a spiral. And the word spit, because that's what dragons do, they spit. And there's various other words which obviously stem from this root. Now, the word spirit is synonymous with cloud, okay? It's very similar, like cloud, spirit, and vapor. All of these are very allegorical of each other. They're pretty much referencing the same sort of etheric quality. And all these words, spirit, cloud, and vapor, are rooted in dragon etymology. A good example is vapor. The word vapor is etymologically cognizant with viper, all right? Not hard to see how that works out. Vapor and viper. Yeah, the viper, of course, being a kind of snake. And then cloud is obviously rooted in the kula root of group words that are dragon root words. Now, obviously, kula being the end of Dracula. We've spoken about vampires and how Dracula is actually a dragon, because Dracul, the word Dracul actually does mean dragon. But let's have a look at this. For argument's sake, we're going to use the word kolu to reference cloud, because all you would have to do is move the L in front of the O, and you've got kolu, and that is the root of cloud. Okay, it's the kulo root, and of course, kolo is the root of Columbus, and column, that would be the root of column, but colon, for example, and that is all dragon or serpentine etymology. Now, what is also interesting is we talk about the four creational elements, which is actually five. The creational myth also ties into, guess what? Dragons. And what's interesting is that in most cultures, past and present, there is very distinctive versions of the creational myth, which in many cases involves dragons or serpents. And it's just so funny that there's so many similarities between the creational myths from different cultures, apparently from different times and different parts of the world, but they've all got a common element referencing a dragon or serpent-like being in these myths as said to be part of the process of this creation, okay, creators. Well, obviously there's the most common creational story, of the story of Adam and Eve and the serpent in the Garden of Eden. And basically this is the one which revolves around the recurring themes of serpents and trees and fruit, and it references the earth element. So there's a lot tied in to the Garden of Eden story. But what's most interesting to notice is that, like, in another part of the world almost, which is Australia. You've got the Australian Originals Dreamtime story about Rainbow Serpent, who apparently is also involved with the epic of creation and their creational myth. Now have a look at that, how Rainbow Serpent is shaped across like that, like a rainbow across the sky. And then you've got the Egyptian creational myth, and you've got Newt like a rainbow across the sky or a ceiling across the sky. Okay, and here's another version of this, Newt stretched across the sky. This is, you know, if you study Egyptian iconography, this is something that's probably very familiar to you because you come across this one quite a lot. It's Newt across the sky, obviously Newt giving the name to the word night, N-I-G-H-T. And of course you've got Geb underneath. There's normally 3 characters in this particular depiction of creation. It's Shu, Geb, and Newt. And Geb is normally the one on the floor here. This would be the equivalent of Geb. Now, what's interesting to notice is Geb, in some of these depictions, is actually depicted with a serpent's head. Okay, so in some of the depictions of the Egyptian creational myth, the primary character of Geb is often depicted with a serpent's head. Very interesting. So serpents tie into the Egyptian creational myth as well. Very interesting indeed. Well, the most commonly asked questions, okay, that I get from people, when you start, you know, we've been pointing out little circles and how things tie into each other, and, you know, we can go round and round and round in circles and keep pointing things out, oh, this ties into this ties into this, and we will, you know, all we keep doing is proving the point of what we've been saying. But surely this has to be going somewhere. You know, and this is one of the things that my devoted dragonology students say to me, I'm very keen to see where this is going. Oh, I'm curious to see where this is going. Where are you going with this? And, you know, I never know what to tell people because I always feel like I'll be a little bit of a disappointment if I kind of just say to them, well, I'm kind of just working this all out like everybody else. But, you know, that'd be the honest truth. However, being someone who wants to take responsibility for the information that I teach to people, there has to be some kind of destination that we're headed towards. We can't just sort of be rudderless in the water, not knowing which direction we're going. So let's deal with the ultimate questions. If dragons are our gods and were responsible for the creation of man, what is humanity's purpose? What role do the dragons play in our existence here and now? And can humanity ever be free of the draconian construct? Let's attempt to answer some of these questions, shall we? Well, first off, it is essential always to base all your decisions, actions, and words upon tangible proof that can be proven from several different perspectives and multiple sources of reference. So let's look at the evidence. First off, the human race did not evolve naturally on this planet. There is much evidence in human DNA to suggest that we were genetically spliced together from several different species, and therefore we did not evolve. We were created by an advanced race, species, or force. Evolution is flawed. The theory of evolution is completely flawed. We were told that we evolved from primate to something like this and then became what we are today. No, that did not happen. All right? That is not what happened to humanity. Evolution theory is flawed for humans, and there is several reasons why the evolution theory even evolved in the first place. And that is because the theory of evolution was a politically motivated and developed theory developed specifically to push the tenets of social Darwinism, which was used to justify the practice of eugenics based upon the principles of survival of the fittest. So basically, it's like, okay, so those people who were born perfectly healthy, they deserve to live. And those who perhaps have Down syndrome or one eye or retarded, we'll just like kill them off and put them out of their misery. And that's what the eugenics movement was all about. And that whole premise was predicated upon the principle of survival of the fittest. The fittest deserved to survive. And in order to ensure that we had a fit and healthy race, it was our duty to get rid of anybody who was like retarded or mentally disabled or physically disabled. And this is basically why Charles Darwin evolved this theory of evolution, was to facilitate what became known as eugenics. And it was such a popular theory that it got pushed into schools as, the truth of things. And, quite frankly, it's not. But with people kind of moving out of the whole, biblical way of thinking into a scientific and secular way of thinking, they had to find a way in which to control people through scientific means. So, of course, they make up all these scientific theories and teach it as fact. Because if you don't want to believe in religion, hey, we've got something else for you. It's called science. You can believe in that, even though that is just as flawed as religion. Because, as much as people didn't want to believe the creational theory or the creation myth because it doesn't make sense, like most of the stuff you read in the Bible, which is allegorical. Well, the story of evolution, it doesn't make sense either. There's just too many gaps in. Let's have a look. For a moment, okay, just the common sense things that, we can work out for ourselves just by looking around, okay? If you think about it, a creature that evolves naturally into its environment doesn't need all the artificial things that human beings need, such as wardrobes and other consumer-oriented surplus items. I mean, think about it. We don't see turtles walking around with the latest pair of shades or sunglasses, or for that matter, lizards driving around in the latest Ferrari, or, hello about the horse taking the estate agent to look at a house. That doesn't happen. There's a whole artificial culture of shopping malls and consumerism and clothing and, hairdressing salons and film and cinema and all this external stuff, artificialness, which has evolved to facilitate humanity. There's no other creature on our planet that has anywhere near the kind of need for these things, because they evolve whatever they need naturally. Think about it. A snail needs a house. It grows its house, okay? A rabbit needs its house. It digs it out of the ground. They don't go every morning and put on a new fur coat. Their coat is always with them. They evolve into what they need, and they always have with them. Unfortunately, simple fact is we are not adapted to our environment because we didn't evolve on this planet. For example, the density of our bones is actually not really even suited to this planet. It's probably suited to a planet with a gravity of about 1/3 of what we have. There's a lot of things that just don't make sense about the human physique. And it's very much a case of, we probably didn't evolve naturally on this environment called Earth. And that is obvious by the need to build homes and clothe ourselves and have, create things to fend off the elements of nature, because we are not capable of doing it for ourselves, because we did not spend the time in nature evolving these mechanisms like other creatures who have lived on this planet for however many thousands or millions of years. They've had the time to do that. We have not. So we've not had the time to evolve, and that is proven as well by looking at what is known as the mitochondrial DNA, which is only traceable in the DNA of the mother, the matriarch. Interesting, it's called mitochondrial or matriarch. They sound very similar, but basically through tracing it through the female line, okay, we've been able to reveal that the human genome in its current form is no older than 250,000 years old. And in fact, you can trace the genomes down to a very, very small group of root races that have kind of been set out onto the planet. And of course, this does indicate that the human race has not had nearly enough time to evolve from primate to human. 250,000 years is not nearly enough generations to make that massive a leap in evolution. So it's going to be a case of creation, not evolution. And it's not that the story of Adam and Eve is 100% bang on. It's symbolically allegorical. And there's in the symbolism, and we've dealt so much with the creational myth throughout these dragonologies. You know what? You can now not tell me that there's not some truth to that creational myth. Far from being relegated to the realms of semi-dismissive mythology, the creational myth, which is prevalent in many different cultures and normally features dragons and serpents, has some validity to it, in so much as that the human race was created. Now, what's interesting is that it's not just the gods who can create humans. We've been able to do it as well, okay? They've been cloning babies and you know, in black ops, genetically splicing and making hybrid beings for many years now. But, you know, just as an example, if we can do it, what's to say that an advanced race can't do it? All right, so just looking at it from a common sense point of view, we can clone babies and we can create babies without actually having to go through the process of, you know, copulation or intercourse. Who's to say that it can't be done by somebody else? Now, what's interesting to notice is that we were made by the DNA of a number of different beings, and there's actually evidence on our planet of different types of humanoid beings having existed. For example, these ones with the strangely shaped skulls, these are not typically human, but they seem to have human-like features, human-type teeth, nose and eye socket, but we don't see these type of skulls on people today. So just to show that there have been other species of Homo sapien or hominid or whatever that was, and perhaps DNA from these beings was used to create what we have now. Who knows? But what is clear is that there have been many different types of other type of human or hominid type creatures. And what's interesting is they've appeared in different parts of the world, such as this is one of these elongated, abnormal, well, skulls that don't look quite human in South America. And you've got them in Egypt too. And you've got depictions of Egyptian pharaohs in ancient art being shown as well with these elongated heads. They weren't hiding it. They were showing exactly what these pharaohs looked like. And then, of course, there's the giant version of the humanoids or human beings in the form of skeletons. And it does say in the Bible that there were giants on the earth before the floods. So there's just endless depictions, and seems to be every other day now a different giant skeleton is being found. I mean, look at this. Bigger, the skull's bigger than this entire guy's body almost, okay? These are giant human type of beings, or what has become known to us in fairy tales as giants. Other versions of humans, okay? This is a skeleton of Neanderthal man, which is very similar to the skeleton of Homo sapien, and this is the being that was here before Homo sapien came along, okay? And the evidence is clear. There is evidence found in bones and artifacts indicating the existence of other species of humanoid beings being here before this present species. From Neanderthal man to giant skeletons to elongated and oddly shaped skulls, there is clear evidence for other hominid species having evolved. They may have contributed to our existing DNA, having been used by the creational process or in the creational process that made humanity. Now, this is one of the other things that we can sort of categorically prove if you start looking at artworks and reading literature, and that is that gods are dragons, dragons are gods, gods are, the dragons are angels, angels are dragons, dragons are demons, demons are dragons, or angels are gods. They are inextricably linked all together. They just get referenced as different things in different cultures under different labels. And most of the time, these different labels are just mechanisms of subterfuge. They're there, obviously, just to keep people guessing in a way or hiding the truth. Like all labels and all symbolism, which are all mechanisms of subterfuge. There are endless accounts and ancient depictions of gods being dragons or serpentine or being able to change form. All right. Now, this is one of my favorite depictions, Giulio Romano's 16th century depiction of Jupiter seducing Olympia. And this particular depiction shows not like that looks like a bit of a rape scene going on. She doesn't look too willing. But what's interesting to notice is the lower part of him, not even into feet, but that is a definite serpent tail. I beg your pardon, I've jumped there. But that is a definite serpent tail. Yeah, a dragon tail. He's a shape-shifting dragon. Interesting. So that's Jupiter, okay, one of the primary gods of the pantheon. Very interesting. Now, it does say in Genesis chapter 6, verse 4 about this sort of interbreeding, which obviously gets hinted at here between the gods, the angels, and what looks to be human-like beings. The Nephilim were in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. The same were the mighty men that were old, the men of renown. Okay. Now, often when you read about heroes of old, what they're referencing are the royal angelic bloodline that were born from the mixing of dragon DNA with human DNA. Okay, so these creatures so loved their creation that they copulated with them and created royal angelic bloodline, which ended up ruling over humanity. And there's just so much proof that royalty and many heads of state are in fact dragons. Okay, there's many old depictions, ancient depictions and representations of past kings and queens, even presently, kings, queens, emperors, and other rulers being able to take the form of a dragon or being depicted in the form of a dragon or with, sort of, again, the fish tail with the wings, always there. And there's the crown showing royalty, but also the grail with the serpent on it, which is obviously depicting the royal dragon bloodline, because that's what this representation always means. And this is a depiction of Queen Melusine, who was actually a queen who really lived. In fact, there were 3 Queen Melusines in French history. And here's some old depictions of them that you can find, not sort of modern day drawings, but, where it's carved into plaster, right? Ancient depictions of Queen Melusine with wings here again. And here we go. Here's a shield with Queen Melusine here. You can see the tail very clearly in the shape of a serpent. That might even be a serpent's head there, but it's very clear in the shape of a serpent there. Or a mermaid's tail, right? And don't forget, Queen Melusine was also the Starbucks logo. And then, of course, is the famous story of Queen Melusine's secret discovered, where you see Queen Melusine both with the wings and with the tail in this one. And this is also a 16th century painting in a storybook for children, funny enough. And then, of course, coming up to more recent times, Queen Elizabeth I. This is a depiction of Queen Elizabeth I holding what seems at first to be a bunch of flowers which were painted over in white, but over the time the white has faded to reveal that there was something underneath. Okay, because if you have a look close up, you can see there's something underneath there. And when they actually did reconstructed X-ray pictures and looked at what could be underneath, this is what they found. That actually Queen Elizabeth I in this picture was originally holding a snake, and they got some artists to cover it up and put some leaves over here. Not very well, because white has all faded. But they covered up the serpent, tried to cover it up on her hands, not terribly well, tried to cover it up over here. But, with time, the paint has sort of worn down a bit, and you started to see that there was a serpent underneath that she was holding onto. Makes you wonder if the artists knew something or if they were just told to paint that. And also why later they decided to cover it up if it was so brazenly agreed to in the first place. Who knows? Anyway, this is how the dragon royalty and heads of state and various cultic priestly classes have ruled us. This is how they've done it. Through the study of dragonology, we've been able to categorically prove that dragons have always controlled our language, both written and spoken, and they have kept us divided by confusing our tongues, which is even allegorically referenced in the story of the Tower of Babel. The confusion of tongues, okay, is very much a story that we get taught, as part of the Bible. that God came down, confused his tongues, made everybody speak different languages because they dared to build a tower that reached up to the heavens to be with the gods, or whatever the allegory of this Tower of Babel actually is. But some people have said that they did try to build a tower to the sky and that they actually consumed whole mountains of resources building this tower. And what were they trying to reach in the sky? And why was it such a bad thing that the gods got pissed off enough to come down and make people speak different languages? And it's through our languages that we have been divided, okay? Because there's nothing that alienates two people more from each other than if they can't understand what each other is saying, or they can't communicate with each other. Trust me, I live in a foreign country from where I was born, and the language here is different to the one that I grew up learning. That's the one thing I have learned through my travels is it's incredibly difficult if you do not speak a language to have natural, fluid communication or natural rapport with people. It does happen, and we have had it. But it does take, obviously, a lot more effort. But this is how they've kept us divided, is through language, through the symbolic representation with which we communicate. That's very, very interesting. Divide and conquer. Through the creation of different languages, religions, nations, and cultures, they have been able to conquer and control humanity. In the game of divide and conquer, we are merely pawns. They keep us busy fighting each other instead of fighting them. Now, language works like this. What is language? Language is basically symbols, letters, and words. And of course, language, these symbols, letters, and words form an intrinsic part of verbal and written communication. There are two processes related to language. Basically, the encoding, which is translate your thoughts into words, and decoding, which is assigning meaning. And that is how language works. It's a constant process of encoding and decoding, and that is the way computers work. It's a constant process of encoding and decoding, all right? And that is the way our brains are programmed to function, is to translate our thoughts into words, okay? The words, obviously, that we've been taught have meaning assigned to them that's decided for us. We didn't decide what meaning goes for those words. It was already assigned. We were taught to then use those words for those particular thoughts or whatever, ideologies, objects, ideals. But basically, once we've got that meaning associated to words, we develop what is known as a language. Language is what equals communication for us. And there was a time when we communicated telepathically when we didn't have words, where perhaps all we needed to do was make a few grunts or the odd noise. We didn't have anything near as complex a vocabulary as we have today. Yeah, that's all a result of dragon interference. All right, so language equals communication equals culture. Okay, it is through communication that we develop culture. It is impossible to develop culture if you cannot get people to communicate, all right? So you have people of the same languages evolving their own little cultures, their own little traditions, their own little practices, and it's generally driven by language. I'm not saying exclusively driven by language, but language is, for me, one of the biggest divisors on the planet, the fact that we all speak different languages. So language equals communication equals culture, and culture equals hereditary prejudice or indoctrination. So your specific culture determines your hereditary prejudice or indoctrination, and it's the other way around. Depending on what hereditary prejudice or indoctrination you've been subjected to depends on which culture you will follow, whether it be Christianic or Muslim or whatever. Now, talking about religious cultures and cults, religion and cults, nothing is more divisive than being led by religions and or cult identification. And I love this piece over here. Religion does three things quite effectively: divides the people, controls the people, deludes the people. Cult culture. Almost every part of our daily existence is predicated around some form of cultural identification through engaging in ritualistic behavior. right? And that's a pretty big statement. Every part of our daily existence is predicated around some form of cultural identification through engaging in ritualistic behavior. Think about that, all right? Most aspects of modern day culture is based around ritual. And the purpose of ritual is what? That's right, to worship the dragon. All ritual is basically aimed at worshiping the dragon. And most of our culture is based around ritual. Okay? So let's look at the most relevant example of ritual. Of course, it's Christmas Eve tonight, so tomorrow would be Christmas. Okay? And a relevant example of ritual is the solar ritual known as Christmas, where we celebrate the worship of the birth of the sun, which is symbolically represented as Jesus. Okay? Now, what's interesting, let's have a look at this. How does Jesus play into this whole story? Now, Jesus is actually a sun god, all right? The son of God, or God's son, which is represented as the actual, sun that shines. Basically, at winter solstice, which is the 21st December, the sun dies for 3 days. Okay, no, we've heard that before, dead for 3 days and born again. Okay, that plays into the story of Jesus. But basically what happens the 21st December is the sun dies for 3 days. Having moved south continually from the equinox, actually it's when it reaches its highest point in the sky, which is summer solstice, it then begins to move south and starts getting lower and lower in the sky from the point of view of the northern hemisphere. And now, having moved south continually through the course of the later part of the year, what happens is the sun seems to stay in the same point in the sky for 3 days. So the sun doesn't rise, but doesn't move beyond a certain point for 3 days. So it appears that the sun is dead for 3 days. But then on the 25th of December, the sun moves for the first time in 3 days, this time 1 degree to the north. And this would be obviously the indicating of the lengthening of days, which obviously lead to spring, which of course allegorically references the birth of the sun. Okay. Now, what's very interesting to notice is the story of Jesus talks about 3 kings, which references these 3 stars of Orion's belt, who follow the star in the east to find the birth of the Son of God, the Son of God. Right? And basically is talking about the alignment in the sky at this time of year, which basically has the 3 main stars of Orion's belt pointing directly to the star in the east, which is Sirius, or the morning star. And that points directly to the place on the horizon where the sun comes up, because that is the place where the sun is born, God's son, or the Son of God. Interesting, hey? And of course, here's a depiction of it in terms of what it would look like on the horizon. So the sun is coming up here. Here's the star of Bethlehem, or Sirius, or the star of the east, as it was known. And the 3 wise men, which follow the star in the east to find the birth of the sun, the sunrise. Now, what's interesting to notice is that Jesus was not the only person born on the 25th of December. There is a number of different pre-Christian saviors and saints who also share the 25th of December birthday, because they too were also sun gods, because this sun ritual has been going on long before the myth of Jesus came along. So we've got, let's have a look. The Egyptian gods Horus and Osiris, both born the 25th. Birthday of Attis of Phrygia, Krishna, Zoroaster, Mithra, Hercules, Dionysus, Tammuz, Adonis, Hermes, Prometheus. Okay? Now, that is very interesting. All of these various deities are allegorical of sun gods, since they were all born on the 25th of December. Jesus, if he ever actually lived, however, was born somewhere in June, probably around the 16th, according to most scholars, but is celebrated on the 25th because some early church leaders wanted to seize the enthusiasm from the crowds of whether being gathered on a day that was holy to many people. What basically they've done is taken the Christian religion and stretched it to be a template over the old pantheistic and pagan religions. And yet the Christian religion will condemn the pagan and pantheistic religions as ungodly or of the devil or wrong, or, you can't follow that stuff because you've got to follow our religion. But really, they're the same thing. They're all the same thing, and this is proven by the fact that they all have the same deities born on the same day because they all represent the sun. They just got different names. Okay, but ultimately, they're all representing the same thing. That's what matters, is what is it symbolically allegorical of? It doesn't matter what letters or names are attached to things. That's just labeling. We need to look at what the allegory or the real meaning of these things actually are. And when you look at that, you'll find actually many of these things are referencing the same damn thing. Actually, many of them are just referencing the dragon. True. Now, what is the point of religion and worship? Okay, what is this really all about? And worship comes down to the fact that worship is energetic focus. The concept of worship is a practice whereby one gives adoration, praises, attention, time, and energy to a specific deity, practice, or ideology. Some people might worship material objects such as idols or their Mercedes-Benz. Who knows? But worship basically is where you put a lot of time, effort, adoration, basically energy, focus. As we say in New Age circles, energy flows where attention goes. So, good question. What is your attention focused on? What are you putting your energy into? And this brings up the most relevant point at this juncture, and that is the end game. What does this come down to? And what it comes down to and what it's all about is the harvesting of our energy. And I do love this particular freeze frame of Morpheus holding a battery in the film The Matrix, where he shows Neo, this is what we are. We are a battery. Okay? Humanity is cultivated for a specific purpose. Humanity is being cultivated through culture to facilitate the maximization of energy being directed towards the gods or dragons or angels or demons, whatever you want to call them. It's the same damn thing. The human race has been routinely messed with and enslaved by gods, stroke dragons, stroke angels, who have cultivated us into a slave species. That is what has become of us. The Sumerian clay tablets basically describe how the Anunnaki came to Earth and how humanity was created to mine for gold in what is present-day South Africa. There's a number of authors and scholars who have done research and written about this. So this is stuff you can actually look up for yourself. But basically, it's been about gold. As far back as you can trace man's history, we cannot be separated from the worship of dragons, the practice of slavery, or the obsession with gold. And of course, the Hebrew word offer means gold. Offer contains the dragon root word ophi, O-P-H-I. Ophi is etymologically cognizant with offer and offering, as in a gold offering. Now, here's a particular picture of Buddha where you can go and actually buy gold leaf and give a gold offering to Buddha by putting this gold leaf on. You can see it's absolutely packed in gold where people have put their gold leaf offerings all over Buddha. And this is common in many religions, is giving an offering, but particularly the gold offering to the gods comes down to this particular thing, is that this obsession with gold and the gods and the dragons is all linked in together. And human beings being used by the gods to mine for gold for a specific reason. Now, sacrificial offering and tax. All right. Now, gold has been obviously used for trade and the basis supposedly of currencies for many, many years. But what is it really all about? Okay, now we use tender fiat currency, supposedly many years backed by gold, not so much anymore, but it was originally started off as something that was backed by gold, okay, and that was used to pay taxes with. You know, the native Africans, when they started being issued with a hut tax by the government in South Africa, they were forced to pay their taxes in gold sovereign rather than in cattle, like they'd previously been forced to do. So tax and gold are inextricably linked. So, and very much like we go and we put gold on the Buddha and you've got to pay, and it is a bit of a sacrifice because you're paying your money to get a gold leaf and then put it on the Buddha, and it is just there. You know, it's all this wealth that's been accumulated on this idol or representation of a god, okay? And it's all allegorical. Gold offerings are a form of tax and technically form the basis of sacrificial offering, okay? Now, sacrifice, getting onto sacrifice. Ritual sacrifice is inextricably linked with those that control the world today. Cannot be separated. There's so much research out there about this, so many interviews with different people who've been a part of these cult circles that we cannot ignore what it is telling us. Cult ritual sacrifice is a pivotal part of the worship of the dragon. Again, it's all about harnessing the energy. And of course, tax funds war. Our tax money funds the war. War is sacrifice. You can't have slaves without a war, and you can't have war without weapons. In paying taxes, we are complicit in our own demise. We are paying for them to kill us, and that's a fact. And I love these signs over here. I'm not paying for war. Yeah, why should we pay for war? Why should we pay to kill other people that we don't know? Yeah, why should we pay for the sacrifice? Why should we participate in the ritual any longer? Yeah. So, the ultimate question, can we ever be free? And I love this over here, because some people seem to lose track of what it is that is necessary, all right, and what it is that is required from the natural inner part of us, our inner being, all right? And basically, I love this. It is the natural born duty of every one of us to defend and protect the will of the human spirit. Anything else is a diversion in a corrupted world, and our denial of the truth is the first stage of submission. Isn't that beautiful and so poetically true? To deny the fact that we should stand up and protect the will of the human spirit is the first stage of submission to our draconian overlords. So, yes, we can start to do something by standing up and saying no. Yeah, we do not wish to be a part of this anymore. We do not wish to participate in these rituals. We will not pay taxes. We will not fund wars that kill innocent people. Freedom is our birthright. The fight for freedom has never ended and will always need to be fought. War has never ended and will always be waged against humanity until we stop it. Never forget, all that is necessary for evil to flourish is for good people to do nothing. Now, this is what most people struggle with, and that is the hard work, okay? The stuff that if we really and truly want to constructively make a change for the better, okay, and change things from the way they are, you know, the prison planet that we live in into the paradise that we absolutely know can exist, there's several things that have to happen, and some of them are pretty damn hard because a lot of people don't want to give up on their old habits. It's too much hard work for them. They don't want to break away. They want to be free. You know, they like the idea of being free. They just can't handle the reality of what it takes to be free. But this is what it takes. In order to break free from the draconian construct, we need to stop engaging in and giving energy to ritual, even those deeply rooted in our culture. And think about what we consider as culture. It says here, culture is the sum of all forms of art. Okay, so think about that. All forms of art, architecture perhaps. You know, we talk about the ancient, the Aboriginals or the originals and the tribes of Africa before the colonialists got there. They were nomadic. They weren't people who enclosed environments and put up big buildings and had mass civilizations. Most of them were nomadic pastoralists who moved from one part to the other. And it was very much the same for the Aboriginal cultures, or the original cultures, I should say. And this is why when Captain Cook came along and decided to take over Australia, they used the term terra nullius, which means no clearing of spaces, no enclosure, and no permanent structures. And if they didn't see that, it meant they felt they had the right to take the land from the Aboriginals, or the originals, I should say. So humanity, before sort of civilization and society was imposed onto us through cultural programming, kind of didn't engage in things like architecture per se, okay, as one example. Now, another thing we'd have to perhaps think about giving up, which is a ritual, would be sport. And that's very hard for the rugby and football addictive person. Gaming, you know, think about that. Those people who love to gamble and all that kind of thing. Even the culture of partying and festivals and celebrations, all rooted in ritual. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. We all like to have a few drinks and a bit of a party from time to time, okay? But it is all rooted in ritual. You know, dressing up and Halloween, Christmas. Could you imagine getting rid of Christmas forever? I mean, all these things, theoretically, if we really want to make a change, this is what has to go, because it all feeds into the ritual. It's all part of the draconian construct. And to get people to change to the point where we could potentially get rid of Christmas, well, this is it, where I say people like the idea of freedom, but they don't like the reality of what they have to do in order to get that freedom. And then, this is the hardest bit, okay? I don't have all the answers, but what I have learned is that if we ever want to be free of the draconian construct, we need to first change our writing and language, which binds us into a spell as we think in the words that we've been taught to associate with certain concepts and ideologies. Language and writing is rooted in ritual. And this is it. We've even got to change our language, even the symbols that we use. Imagine having to relearn an entirely new language. Imagine, whole new language. No longer communicate the language that we know. That's not going to happen tomorrow or in this generation. It may take several generations for that to happen. But what we need to realize is that this is something that potentially does have to happen if we're ever going to escape the draconian construct. And it's a big, tall order. You know, it's just, you know, create a new language, create new symbols with which we communicate, or new ways of communicating. Let's develop our telepathic capacities, get back to how we're supposed to be. That's not going to happen overnight, and that's not going to be easy to convince people to do just like that. Well, I don't know, maybe if suddenly we all got our pituitary gland or third eye switched on by some energetic force that came in, maybe then it could happen. But what I'm saying is humanity in its current fallen state, it's a tall order. The root of our enslavement. The very words, concepts, and ideologies we are taught to identify with through cultural programming is all rooted in the need for and the use of words and language, which form the very building blocks of the way we think and process our reality. So the building blocks of our reality are formed by letters and words, which then form sentences and concepts and ideas, and the ability to then talk and, you know, communicate and extrapolate on complex concepts with people through communication. It all starts with basic building blocks of words. And of course, here we've got the alphabet. And what's interesting to notice is that the reality of the best case scenario is, even if we take down the cabal and the control structure, we cannot write new laws or guidelines for a new society until we completely change the words and structure of our communication, which is all rooted in the draconian construct. And one of the most obvious examples of this is, all right, just look at the letter A. What is encoded into the letter A? Well, the letter A, okay, as you've seen here, being the first letter of the alphabet, over here, alpha, depicting that which comes first, alpha and omega, the God eye, the all-seeing eye, okay, because the letter A is in fact referencing the all-seeing eye, the capstone, because that section there is a section over here. Right. That is what the letter A represents. It represents this depiction of the all-seeing eye separated from the capstone. Okay, that would be where the A comes down and the belt of the A goes across there. This and this form that section over there. That forms the section here, and the all-seeing eye bit would be the section that goes here. It's not too far of a stretch for anybody to see how that works. So just the letter A represents this particular symbolic depiction. And for those of you who've been following Dragonology or who research at all in this area, you all know what this depiction means. Okay, and the fact that this is symbolically encoded into our alphabet, which is then encoded into our language, okay, and we're only using one letter as an example here. All the others also have their own unique sort of hidden symbolic and occult allegories. But this is the reason why we have to change our entire language, because this is what our language is based upon, is images like this. Right? This is what we're representing. It might seem like we have a lot of work to do, and sometimes it may be overwhelming, but you know what? We must never give up. At times it seems like we're in a hopeless struggle, but I, for one, would rather die fighting than rot slowly on my knees. At times it may seem hard, but we must never give up. And that, my dear friends, is the end of Dragonology Season 2. I hope that you've enjoyed the season as much as you enjoyed Season 1. And hopefully we'll be back next year with some more for you. I can't say one way or the other whether that's definite, but we'll just have to wait and see. These 2 seasons have been an absolute labor of love. And I hope for all of you who have tuned in for the 2 seasons, you have learned a lot. For those of you who have actually written to me and shared your thoughts and research with me, thank you ever so much. There's a piece of every one of you in these 2 seasons that we've put out. It's been a real privilege to indulge my passion of dragons and to be able to teach what I know to those who are keen to listen and learn. So for those of you who have found our work valuable, please do go to the CCN Network Support Fund and contribute to our work. We cannot continue to run this network without public support and funding, and we certainly won't be able to continue to bring shows like Dragonology to the public. So please, guys, contribute to our Network Support Fund and keep us on the air for 2016. We certainly cannot do it without you guys, because this network ultimately belongs to all of you. Information is the common heritage of all beings, and that means it's up to you guys to help keep us on the air. Please go to the GoFundMe campaign, and you can also donate as well, just on the offline donation on our homepage, or you can go to the GoFundMe campaign and actually write a little message and put your donation in there and make it public, or do it privately. It's up to you. And if you can't spare money, we know that a lot of people are struggling. Like our work, share our clips, and of course, do share the funding campaign with as many people as you can. Also, please do like our Facebook page and share whatever you find on our Facebook page with other people. Feel free to interact on there as well. Do share our YouTube archives. We're now uploading our YouTube archives in 720p, so they're incredibly good quality. And of course, if you want to contact us, our email address is info@consciousconsumernetwork.tv. And of course, we now have a CCN shop as well with some really awesome threads. So guys, do go check that out. Each and every penny does go to supporting free and independent media. And of course, you can find that on our CCN website, which is consciousconsumernetwork.tv. It's on the homepage. Check out the shop, go to the live page, or you can find the broadcast guide, which gives you a weekly updated broadcast guide of everything that is on the network for that week. And as I said, it is updated every week, and every week we're putting new stuff on. So constantly keep checking to see when your favorites are on. We've got some great stuff coming up for the new year. So don't go anywhere. CCN isn't going anywhere. We'll be right here. As always, we thank you guys for supporting free and independent media. This truly has been an honor and a privilege to share these 2 seasons of Dragonology with you. My name is Mel Ve, and I will see you guys very, very soon. Good night. The pursuit of a free, fair, just, sustainable world should be the focus of every person on our planet. The reason it is not is because people are kept distracted by the illusions and deceit propagated by the corporately controlled mainstream media. In recent years, the rise in truly informed, savvy researchers and journalists who have all taken to the air in various capacities has given rise to a new genre of media. We have seen the explosion of truly free and independent media, and thus the need to create an ethical live broadcast network that facilitated these brave and tireless souls became apparent. With a great amount of research and meticulous planning, Conscious Consumer Network was created. CCN is the first of its kind broadcast network that is specifically dedicated to free and independent media with absolutely no government control, corporate sponsorship, or advertising. The live broadcast network runs full-time with an average of 25 shows and live broadcasts a week. The high-definition live stream is free to view and is accessible from any computer terminal with online access, including laptops, tablets, smartphones, and smart TVs. All shows are archived onto YouTube and are freely available to view in order to educate and inform as many as we can without imposing monetary limitations. CCN was successfully launched on the 1st of January 2015 and has gone from strength to strength as we have improved and increased the capacities and functionalities of the network, as well as an ever-rotating and improving lineup of content which is broadcast daily. CCN is blessed to be the home of some of the hardest hitting, most cutting-edge, truly educational and informative materials. Catch interviews, reviews, and talk shows from the many different and beautiful perspectives from CCN's family of interviewers and broadcasters. Since the 1st of January 2015, we have produced over 800 shows. We have over 2 million YouTube minutes watched every month, and we have an average of 1 million hits a day on CCN's website. CCN is viewed in over 147 different countries and hosts broadcasters from 5 different continents. The time has now come to generate funding to keep CCN on the air for the duration of 2016. The total sum needed to continue broadcasting for 2016 is $60,000. This budget includes the replacement of computer equipment, the acquisition of secure servers, which are most needed as we keep getting hacked, plus the renewal of the broadcast license fee for 2016. This is a fraction of the annual budget used by mainstream media networks producing a similar quantity of content. This is what makes CCN so successful, unique, and accessible, is the ability to run a project of this size and reach on such minimal resources. CCN does not claim ownership over any of the material we produce and broadcast, as we firmly believe that information is the common heritage of all beings, and thus CCN belongs to you, the public, and it is up to you all to keep CCN going. CCN would like to thank those who have contributed to the network in the past with resources, content, information, time, and energy. We thank you for supporting free and independent media.
Felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders.